Welcome back. It is a sunny and hot Thursday here at Indiana Sports Beat, but that's okay because we've got Dustin Schutte and now joined by the great Chris Denari, the voice of the Pacers, and Augie. Augie making his debut. So congratulations to Augie.
He's hiding under the desk right now.
He'll learn. He'll
get it. He'll understand every Thursday about 9:50 what he needs to do.
The lights go on. When his ears start perking up, all like, oh man, you can tell when that things are getting well. How are things with you?
Good. Was able to watch a lot of summer league. Every summer league game was televised either on ESPN, ESPN2, or NBA TV. And I thought, when we saw the Pacers early on, play the players that they wanted to play, Benedict Mathurin, Chris Duarte, Isaiah Jackson, Terry Taylor, they looked really, really good. And so what they did is they decided to shut down. They wanted to play Duarte a game, and I thought he looked really good, second-year player. Mathurin was second team all summer league. He only played 3 games. If you look at his points per minute, he was probably one of the highest in summer league. I think Matt Ryan of Boston was the only other player. So he was very efficient. And I just think the youth that you saw with the Pacers during that time, was very impressive. Still a ways to go. And then, of course, during summer league, you had the contract offer, the largest in NBA history, to DeAndre Ayton. Phoenix decided to match that. So we'll just have to wait and see. There's still a lot of time left in the summer. It's only July 21st. I have a feeling that there's probably another move here or there that the Pacers will make before training camp opens in September.
And I was going to ask, did you ever, when that first happened, did you think that there was a chance that Phoenix would not match that?
I was hoping they wouldn't, but in the back of my mind, their window is right now to win a championship. They've got one of the best veteran guards in the NBA in Chris Paul. You just max Devin Booker. With where they are from a salary cap issue, they've got to go for it right now. So I think from that standpoint, it made a lot of sense for them to match the contract. But I think what it did, and I'm sure Dustin would agree, this is a little bit different than what the Pacers have done in the past. They've never gone after a restricted free agent in this type of marketplace. I think back in the mid 2012, 13, 14, Chris Copeland was a restricted free agent out of New York, but that was not for a lot of money. And the Pacers absolutely knew that the Knicks could not match his contract. This was going for a home run, going for a grand slam. And even though it didn't work, I think it showed a lot of people, not only in the Indianapolis market and Pacers fans, but people across the NBA, that this is a little bit different approach. And if the Pacers feel like they can swing for it, they're going to go for it.
Well, and I had heard, and I'm not probably as well versed on some of these contracts and things like that, but it also sends a message, in my opinion, to your team that, hey, we think that not only maybe we're still in the rebuilding phase here, but we're looking for the short term, and we're hoping that we can be able to compete here for a championship in the next couple of years. I think even though you don't land the deal and you don't get a player like DeAndre Ayton, I think the message it sends is that we're trying to compete for an NBA championship here in the next 2 to 3 years. And I think that's a positive message to send with your current players.
Yeah, and I think it also sends message to other players and agents across the NBA that if there is a free agent opportunity down the road, whether you're unrestricted or restricted, that the Pacers are going to play, and they want to do whatever they can to make their roster better. I think they feel like they have a lot of good young pieces led by Tyrese Halliburton. And again, I haven't talked to you, since the Malcolm Brogdon trade went down. They were able to get Nesmith, who I think is going to be a nice player for the Pacers, give them some depth at the wing position. He played in Boston. So what they're doing is they're setting the table, and they're rebuilding this franchise around somebody like Tyrese Halliburton. the player that we don't know, and he's always been out there in trade talks, and that's Miles Turner. But I also think Chad Buchanan a few weeks ago on an Indianapolis radio station said, look, we are not marketing Miles Turner. That does not mean that we won't listen to offers and take calls in, but we are not going out there. Now, you could say, what were they going to do with Miles Turner if they got DeAndre Ayton? But at the same point, I think there's some interest in seeing how Miles Turner fits with this new group. He never played with Tyrese Halliburton. He never played with Buddy Hield. He never played with Jalen Smith. So I think there's an interest to see what he might be able to do with this new young core that the Pacers have developed.
And the guy that you just mentioned, Chris, was what I kind of wanted to talk about. To me, the signing Jalen Smith, I mean, during the season, you and I had talked on this show about is Jalen Smith playing his way out of Indiana because he was playing so well and the Pacers can only offer him a certain contract, and you thought it was going to be re-upped by somebody else around the league, and he decides he wants to stay in Indiana. To me, that's a big addition for the Pacers because he played extremely well. The other thing is I know we've talked about too, I think that there is a little bit of, I don't know if you want to call it magic or whatever, but you find the right player to fit into Indiana and they decide that they want to stay. There's not a lot of organizations that have that same sort of power. For whatever reason, the Pacers ownership, the leadership that they have, they're able to make a lot of these deals because of the culture they have, in my opinion, the city of Indianapolis and just the leadership they have.
Well, and you'll hear a lot of players talk about their experience with Indiana once they leave and they go somewhere else. And that's not saying that other places aren't good because, you have a lot of strong franchises out in the NBA. But I've always talked to former players who have moved on, and they said, look, I really missed Indianapolis. I really missed the fan base. I really missed the organization, how they treated me, not just on the floor, but off the floor. And so I think if that happens over time, and Jalen Smith got just a brief experience in that, you have to tip your hat to him because he had a chance to take way more money up front. But he's also betting on himself in the long term, and he's also betting that he can do what he wants to do with the Pacers. And I think when you look at somebody like Tyrese Halliburton, who is a pass-first point guard who can score. I mean, he averaged 18 points and 10 assists, I think, during his Pacers 25 or 26 games. A player like Jalen Smith is going to flourish in a system with Tyrese Halliburton. So these guys are pretty smart when they look. And I think Jalen's a little bit different. I think from the standpoint that Rick Carlisle in the front office said they had a great opportunity to meet with Jalen. They met with his parents. They met with his agents. And it wasn't just all about the cash grab for Jalen. Right. Sure, he's still making a lot of money. We're talking about pro sports in the NBA. He's still making a lot of money. But he could have made a lot more earlier, and he's betting that he can be better off with the Pacers in the short term and the long term, and that's what he felt is best for his career.
And just real quick, I wanted to ask one more question on that. Sorry to interrupt you, Jim, but I just had one more thought. Does it benefit the Pacers? Because what we just talked about, to have a guy like Lance Stephenson around to say, hey, I made that move once and I regretted it every day. I mean, not every player is going to be the same. Not every situation is going to be the same. But I mean, Lance has talked about, I should have stayed in Indiana. That, one of the biggest regrets of his career. Is he a guy that you think would have that conversation with a guy like Jalen Smith and say, look, do what you want, but this is my experience and it didn't work out for me?
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that. I mean, Lance has been in the building working out, especially up until July 1 before he became an official free agent. Jalen was in the building too. I thought,
was Elvis in the building?
I thought that was the most impressive thing, guys. Is I would go watch some of the rookie workouts getting ready for the draft, and you would see Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson, Chris Duarte, Tyrese Halliburton, TJ McConnell, Dwayne Washington. That's a name that I'm anxious to see if the Pacers are able to bring him back to create cap space to sign DeAndre Ayton. They had to waive Dwayne Washington. I'm a big fan. I really like Dwayne, so I'm hopeful he can come back. Same too, I'm a big fan of Lance. I mean, I don't know where he fits in to what the front office is thinking, what Rick Carlisle is thinking. But I'm a big fan. And so I do think that he might have had some input. Again, Jalen, every player has to make their own decision, but you can just look at what happened to Lance. If he would have stayed in Indiana, his career, I believe, would have been far different.
Something I was looking at, I'm glad you guys went on with that because it took me a minute to do some math. It wasn't long enough that I could do the other side of it, but for the projected starters for the Pacers, which I'm going to assume Duarte, Mathurin, Jalen Smith, Miles Turner, and Halliburton is probably good. Yeah. The average age, 23. Yeah. 23 years old, average age for the starters. And I didn't have time to do the rest of the team. There's a couple of guys that push that number up, like 30. I forget, there's a 30-year-old, there's maybe a 28-year-old, but again, there's a 19-year-old. How young are the Pacers as compared to the rest of the league?
Well, I mean, if you look at Oklahoma City, they're probably one of the youngest teams. And I'll tell you, Tyrese Halliburton has said this in a number of interviews I've seen him do during Summer League. And everybody looks and points to Memphis. And
maybe it was Memphis.
That's what Memphis has done, right? With Ja Morant, with Jaren Jackson, with all of theirs. Now they added Steven Adams, a veteran center. They've got Dylan Brooks, who is a little bit older, but a few years ago they were in the same position as the Pacers, building with their young talent. And then last year they finished second in the Western Conference. Now I'm not going to promise records or standings or any of those types of things, but I think. You look across the NBA, Cleveland has redone it with a young core. And I think that's what the Pacers are hoping to do. In the NBA, as in pro sports, you had Matt Taylor on before me, voice of the Colts. And while the Colts have a number of their core players over the last few years, if you look at their roster today, who will be on their final 53, and what it was 3 or 4 years ago, maybe there's 8, 10 players, that's it, 20%. So the same is sort of true in the NBA, though you have lesser players, that you were really looking at windows. And the Pacers are looking at about a 4 or 5 year window where they feel with this group they can build and rise up in the Eastern Conference. That's a little bit what they did back in 2010, 2011 when they drafted Paul George and Lance Stephenson. They had a little bit older of a younger veteran in Roy Hibbert, and then they added George Hill and David West. That was sort of the core 5. This is a little bit different because I think these guys are all roughly the same age, as Jim said. Miles Turner would be your oldest starter, and he's only 25 or 26. So I think the Pacers have done a good job of building, and that's something the fan base wanted. And I really think it's something that Kevin Pritchard and his staff wanted to do. Sometimes it just takes a while to get there.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I hope the hope isn't to not do well, but one more round of higher drafts is still something this team is going to need to go forward, I think, unless something like the trade for Ayton that didn't happen happened. Yeah. I mean, had that happened, boy, what are we talking about right now? How good this team would be.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I get your point, and I agree with that. I mean, I think it helped the Pacers this year, of course, to be able to have the draft picks that they had. The 6th pick with Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard, I think is going to be a solid player. Looks like he's going to sign a 4-year deal as a second-round draft pick. At some point, though, with this young group, and Dustin, you have to win. Yeah, because if you want to keep guys and you want them to build together, you've got to win games. Because at some point, as you look across the NBA, the Sacramentos, they haven't won, so players don't want to stay there.
Right.
So you have to win. You've got to put yourself in position to win, because we can talk about all the money that these guys make, and it is significant. We get that. They want to compete and they want to win. Because at the end of the day, you are measured by championships and, how far you've taken your team. Because all these guys are making a lot of money. But legacy is built on wins. and championships, and that's what people want.
Well,
That's what he said in Moneyball, baby. If we're not playing to win the last game, what are we doing here?
I mean, that's what to me. Look, I'm a Pacers fan. I want to see them win every game. I don't care if they're 2-60 at some point in the season. I want to see them win. But I do think there's almost a benefit, and I hate to say that as somebody that the Pacers have never tanked. They've always been competitive. But I do think that if they were closer to that 500, if they were flirting with the playoffs, does the franchise decide that they're going to go the route of a rebuild? And I think that this is what the franchise needed. I think that's what a lot of fans wanted. That's just my personal opinion. And I don't know, as much as you don't want injuries, you don't want to play poorly, but I do think there's a silver lining. I think you can look at this glass half full and say, if Miles Turner doesn't miss all these games, if TJ McConnell doesn't miss all these games, maybe the Pacers are stuck in kind of that, 6-10 purgatory, and you're playing in the play-in tournament to try to get to the playoffs. Whereas you took a year that you took your lumps, and now you've got a really young team, and maybe you're not quite that playoff contender, but you've got the foundation there to make that step, and you might be just a piece or two away from really competing in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, because the new NBA, and they have now made it official, the play-in is here to stay. And that means, as we've seen, 7 plays 8, 9 plays 10, loser of 7 and 8, host 9 or 10 to get the 8th spot. You really are playing to be in the top 6, right? Because you don't want to put yourself in that play-in situation. If you're 7 or 8, you have a better chance. But also then if you're 7 or 8, you're either going to play number 2 or number 1. Right. And so really you're trying to fight your way into that top 6. Think back a few years ago when Sabonis was not available in the bubble. The Pacers played very well. They were in the 4-5 seed situation with Miami, but got beat. So I agree with you, Dustin. I mean, you want to win games. I mean, that's the goal. But I think what happened this past year, I think has helped set the Pacers up for the future to get a talent like Benedict Mathurin. When you're constantly drafting in the late teens or even in the 20s, it's a crapshoot to see if you can get somebody that can really help you. I mean, really make an impact. And so I think by drafting number 6 this year, they really got somebody that I think can help them make a huge impact in the NBA.